What happens when the world's most powerful nation suddenly finds itself unwelcome? From cancelled friendships with allies to growing hostility abroad, America's image isn't what it used to be. And here's the truth, more countries than ever are pushing back against U.S. influence. Some with anger. Others with quiet resentment. So which countries are leading this wave of dislike? And why are Americans facing colder receptions across the globe? Stay tuned, because this list may surprise you. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our deep dive documentaries. Let's start the clock. Number 10, France. Yes, even one of America's oldest allies isn't as friendly as you might think. Public opinion polls in 2025 show that only 39% of French citizens view the U.S. positively, a steep decline from previous decades. Why? Three main reasons. Cultural clashes. Many French people criticize what they see as loud or arrogant American behavior. Economic tensions. France has been critical of U.S. trade policies, especially subsidies that hurt European industries. Military disagreements. From the Iraq War to NATO debates, France often sees Washington as too aggressive. And in daily life, surveys show French citizens rank Americans among the least desirable tourists, often citing poor effort to learn the local language. Number 9, Germany. Germany has long been seen as a pillar of U.S. partnership in Europe. But today? Things are changing. According to a 2025 YouGov poll, nearly 60% of Germans say the U.S. has too much influence over Europe. The friction comes from energy disputes. Germany blames U.S. sanctions on Russia for fueling its own energy crisis. Trade fights. Washington's protectionist policies are seen as hurting German carmakers and manufacturers. Military frustration. Germany is pushing for greater European defense independence, reducing reliance on NATO. On the streets, protests against American foreign policy are not rare. From climate issues to Middle East wars, many Germans see the U.S. as a destabilizing force. Number 8, Mexico. You might think America's neighbor would be its closest friend. But in reality, Mexico has deep frustrations with Washington. In 2025, Pew Research found that less than half of Mexicans hold a favorable view of the U.S. The reasons are obvious. Immigration policies, harsh border crackdowns and deportations have fueled resentment. Economic disputes. While the U.S. remains a major partner, China recently overtook the U.S. as Mexico's largest trading partner. Cultural clashes. Many Mexicans feel Americans look down on their country, reinforcing negative stereotypes. Tourists from the U.S. are still welcome, but locals often say Americans show little respect for Mexican culture, something that stirs dislike. Number 7, South Africa. In Africa, South Africa is one of the loudest critics of U.S. policies. As a member of BRICS, the country openly challenges American influence. In 2025, an Ipsos poll showed only 27% of South Africans had a favorable opinion of the U.S. Why the hostility? Geopolitics. South Africa refused to support U.S. sanctions on Russia, instead expanding trade with Moscow. Anti-colonial sentiment. Washington's role in Africa is often viewed as neo-colonial interference. Public anger. Thousands have marched in Cape Town and Johannesburg protesting U.S. foreign policy. For many South Africans, the U.S. represents a superpower that talks about democracy, while pursuing its own interests first. Number 6, Turkey. A NATO ally that no longer feels like one. In 2025, 68% of Turkish citizens said the U.S. was a threat to national security. Why so much distrust? Military disputes. Turkey's purchase of Russian missile systems angered Washington, leading to U.S. sanctions. Regional conflicts. The U.S. support for Kurdish forces in Syria is viewed by Ankara as hostile. Cultural differences. Turkish media frequently portrays Americans as arrogant and meddling in local affairs. Today, Turkey is balancing East and West, but the tilt is clearly moving away from Washington. Number 5, Saudi Arabia. Once one of America's strongest Middle Eastern partners, Saudi Arabia is pulling away fast. The kingdom has joined BRICS, increased oil sales to China, and even started pricing oil in yuan instead of US dollars, a direct challenge to American dominance. Public opinion is shifting too. According to Arab Barometer surveys, over 70% of Saudis distrust US foreign policy. And while thousands of Americans still live and work in Saudi Arabia, locals often describe US influence as overbearing and self-serving. Number 4, Brazil. Latin America's biggest country is distancing itself from the United States. Brazil's government under President Lula has tilted toward China and Russia, with more than 30% of its trade now conducted in yuan instead of dollars. At the same time, U.S. sanctions on Brazilian agriculture, especially soybeans and beef, have fueled resentment. A Pew poll in 2025 found that only 34% of Brazilians view the U.S. positively, a sharp decline from earlier years. On the cultural front, Brazilians often complain about Americans ignoring local customs and expecting English everywhere. Number 3, Iran. For decades, Iran has been one of America's fiercest critics. And nothing has changed. In fact, it's worse. A 2025 Gallup poll found that 85% of Iranians consider the U.S. a hostile power. From sanctions to military threats, to the nuclear issue, Iranians see Washington as their number one enemy. And while some ordinary Iranians admire U.S. culture, the government and state media fuel constant anti-American sentiment, making Americans extremely unwelcome. Number 2, Russia. No surprise here. Since the Ukraine war, relations between Moscow and Washington have hit Cold War lows. In 2025, a Levada Center poll found that 90% of Russians believe the U.S. is trying to weaken their country. Russian state media frequently portrays Americans as enemies of stability. And with U.S. sanctions biting hard, public dislike has only grown. While some Russians admire American movies or technology, the overwhelming mood is distrust, even hatred. Number 1, China. Topping the list is China, America's biggest rival on the global stage. In 2025, the Global Times reported that 88% of Chinese citizens believe the U.S. is actively sabotaging China's rise. From trade wars to military standoffs in the South China Sea, from Taiwan tensions to tech restrictions, hostility runs deep. Chinese media portrays Americans as arrogant, interfering, and desperate to block China's growth. And in everyday life, nationalism means many Chinese see Americans not as friends, but as obstacles. So what does this mean? The U.S. still has allies and admirers worldwide, but its image is slipping. Whether it's Europe, Asia, Africa, or Latin America, dislike of Americans is fueled by politics, economics, and culture. 5 tips for Americans traveling abroad. If you plan to visit countries where anti-American sentiment runs high, here's how to stay safe and respected. Learn local customs, small gestures go a long way. Avoid political debates, don't bring up U.S. policies unless asked. Be respectful and blend in, loud behavior and arrogance will only confirm stereotypes. Stay alert for scams or hostility, especially in areas where protests happen. Show kindness, respect opens doors, even in places where governments dislike the U.S. The world is shifting, and America's role is under more scrutiny than ever. But here's the real question. As more countries turn against Washington, could a new global order emerge, one where U.S. dominance is no longer guaranteed? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more truth-based documentaries that go beyond the headlines. Thanks for watching.